My name is Nana May, and this happened to me. The bank message came while I was washing rice. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, once, then again. I wiped my hands on my apron and picked it up. Your account access has been removed. I read it again, then again. Removed. My heart started racing. That account was mine, my pension, my savings, my safety. I called the bank immediately. The woman on the line told me I was no longer the primary holder. My son was now the administrator. Digitally approved. That was the word she used. Digitally. I felt my chest tighten. I hung up and just stood there, staring at the wall, thinking, why was I the last to know? 2 hours later, Arif and his wife Sanaa walked in laughing. I showed them the message. Arif didn't look surprised. Sanaa smiled like she was calming a child. They said they made changes. For my own good. I told them they took my money without asking. Arif said they were family and knew what was best. I asked why they never told me. Sanaa looked away. That's when I knew they never planned to. That night, I couldn't sleep. My phone glowed in the dark. I opened the family group chat and saw Sanaa's message. Everything is arranged. He won't worry anymore. My hands went cold. What else had they arranged? The next morning, Arif said they were going on vacation. He handed me a note saying groceries would be delivered weekly and I should not leave the house. It's for your safety, Sanaa whispered. I heard the smart lock click as they walked out. My phone buzzed, door access disabled. I tried the handle. It wouldn't open. I watched them drive away through the doorbell app. My own house had become a cage. The fridge was half empty, the pantry almost bare. I sat on the floor and cried. After everything I sacrificed, when did I stop mattering? That night I texted Arif. He saw it. He didn't reply. The next day a delivery came. I couldn't open the door. The groceries were left outside. I slid down the wall, shaking and hungry. That evening my phone buzzed again. This time it was from an unknown number. We need to discuss the documents signed in your name. My blood turned cold. What documents? And who signed them? I stared at the message from the unknown number until my eyes burned. My fingers hovered over the screen. I didn't want to reply. If I pretended not to see it, maybe none of this would be real. But the silence in the house pressed against my ears, and fear pushed me to type. What documents? The reply came almost immediately. We represent the firm that prepared your digital will and property transfer forms. Please call us as soon as possible. My heart dropped into my stomach. A will, property, transfers. I had never signed anything like that. I called. The man who answered spoke in a calm, professional voice, the kind that makes terrible news sound ordinary. He said my house, my land, even the small savings account connected to my pension had been placed under a family trust. The administrator was my son. I didn't sign, I whispered. I would never. He paused. According to our records, it was approved through a DNA verification app and a facial scan. My legs gave way. I slid onto the couch. They had used my face, my phone, my trust, all while I was sleeping in the next room, believing I was still someone who mattered. I hung up and stared at the walls that now, legally, no longer belonged to me. Every photo frame felt like it was judging me. My husband's picture on the shelf seemed to ask why I hadn't protected what he left behind. I called Arif again. No answer. I left a voice note, my voice shaking, asking him to please tell me the truth. Minutes later, Sanaa replied in the family chat, not to me directly, but to everyone. Mom is confused again. Please don't worry. We're handling it. Confused. That word cut deeper than any insult. I typed back, I am not confused. I am locked inside my house. No one replied. That night, the hunger became a dull ache. I drank water to quiet it. I lay in bed, listening to the ticking clock, thinking about all the years I stayed silent to keep the peace. About every time I chose harmony over my own voice. Maybe that was my mistake. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a notification from the smart doorbell. Motion detected. I rushed to the screen. A woman stood outside, holding a clipboard. I shouted through the door, telling her I couldn't open it. She looked uncomfortable, said she was from a home care service arranged by my son. Just checking on you, she said softly, like I was already invisible. When she left, I cried until my chest hurt. That afternoon, another message arrived from the lawyer's office. If you do not respond, the trust will be finalized tomorrow. Tomorrow, everything would be gone. I pressed my forehead against the cold door and whispered, after everything I sacrificed, was I only welcome when they needed something? I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I just stood there, nodding to a house that no longer felt like mine. Then my phone rang. Arif's name lit up the screen. My hand shook as I answered. Mom, please don't make this harder, he said. Harder than locking me in? I whispered. He was silent. That silence told me everything. And in that moment, I realized this was only the beginning. I held the phone to my ear long after Arif stopped speaking, waiting for him to say something that would prove I was wrong about him. My throat burned, my lips trembled, but no sound came out. When he finally hung up, I realized I had been holding my breath. I let it out slowly, like air escaping from a broken tire. The house felt even smaller after that call, as if the walls had leaned closer to listen. I walked to the window and pulled the curtain aside, just enough to see the street. Cars passed. Children laughed somewhere down the block. Life was still moving for everyone else, while I was trapped inside my own memory of who I used to be. I pressed my palm against the glass and whispered my husband's name, asking him what I should do. There was no answer, only my reflection. Older, thinner, and more frightened than I had ever been. The hunger grew louder that evening. It wasn't sharp yet, but it made me weak. I opened the fridge again, hoping something new might appear. Nothing had changed. I rationed a slice of bread, chewing slowly like each bite was a decision about whether I deserved to keep going. I remembered cooking feasts for Arif when he was younger, staying up late to make his favorite dishes before his exams. I used to say love was shown through food. Now, love had locked the kitchen door on me. I checked my phone every few minutes. No new messages. The family group chat was silent, like they had muted me from their lives. I wondered what Sana was telling them. That I was confused. That I was dramatic. That I was a problem they had finally solved. The thought made my chest tighten. I had carried this family on my back for years. Now they were carrying me away like unwanted luggage. When the sun set, I felt something shift inside me. Fear was still there, but beneath it, a small, stubborn spark of anger began to grow. I had spent too many years staying quiet. Too many nights swallowing my words, so no one else would feel uncomfortable. I sat on the edge of the bed and whispered, I didn't raise him like this. Saying it out loud made it feel real. Around midnight, my phone buzzed again. It was not Arif. It was a number I didn't recognize. My heart raced as I opened it. We noticed your distress during our earlier call. There may still be options. Please respond. It was the lawyer. I typed back with shaking fingers, telling him I had never signed anything, that I was locked in my house, that my son had taken everything. The reply came slower this time. We will need proof of coercion or impersonation. Can you access your digital ID history? Digital ID. Another door I didn't know how to open. I tried. My phone asked for a face scan. I hesitated, afraid they might be watching, but I did it anyway. A list of recent verifications appeared. My breath caught. There were several from nights I remembered sleeping. My face, my name, my identity, used without me knowing. Tears rolled down my cheeks as I took screenshots and sent them to the lawyer. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a tiny sense of control return. It was fragile like glass, but it was something. The next morning, my body felt heavy, as if I had aged 10 years overnight. My stomach cramped, reminding me how little I had eaten. I drank water and sat by the door, waiting. I didn't know for what. Maybe for Arif to realize what he had done. Maybe for Sana to feel a moment of guilt. Maybe for someone to remember that I was still human. Instead, I received another message from the family chat. Sana had posted a picture of the beach. Blue sky, white sand, smiling faces. Arif stood beside her, his arm around her waist, looking relaxed. Underneath, she wrote, "Family time heals everything." I stared at the screen until it blurred. My family was healing without me. They had locked me away like a secret they didn't want to face. I wanted to reply, to tell them the truth, but my fingers wouldn't move. Silence had been my language for too long. That afternoon, the doorbell app sent another alert. This time it was a neighbor, Mrs. Khan, holding a bag of fruit. I banged on the door, calling her name. She looked at the camera, confused. I shouted that I was locked inside. She frowned, hesitating. Then her phone rang. I watched her expression change as she listened. She nodded slowly, then left the bag at the door and walked away without looking back. Someone had called her. Someone had told her not to help me. The realization hit me like a wave. They were controlling the story. Everyone would believe them. I would be the old woman who had lost her mind, not the mother who had been betrayed. That night, I dreamed of my house burning while I stood inside, unable to move. I woke up gasping, my heart pounding. In the dark, I whispered, "When did I stop mattering?" The question echoed in the empty room. The lawyer called the next day. His voice was serious now. He said the trust process could be paused if I could prove the signatures were fraudulent. He asked if I had anyone who could witness my condition, anyone who could confirm I was being held against my will. I laughed softly. Who would believe me? My own son had already decided I was a problem to manage. Still, I told him about Mrs. Khan, about the locked door, about the groceries left outside. He said he would file an emergency request for a welfare check. The word emergency made my heart race. What if Arif found out? What if he made things worse? Hours passed. Every sound made me jump. Then, in the evening, I heard sirens in the distance. They grew louder, then stopped outside my house. My knees went weak. I pressed my face to the door, listening to voices. Someone knocked, hard and official. "Naname," a man called. "Police. We're here to check on you." Tears poured down my face. I tried the handle again, but it was still locked. I shouted that I couldn't open it. They spoke to someone on the phone, probably Arif. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, I heard the click of the smart lock. The door swung open. The cool night air rushed in like freedom. A female officer looked at me with concern, her eyes taking in my thin frame, my shaking hands. "Are you okay?" she asked gently. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to pretend I was fine. But the truth spilled out instead. "My son did this," I whispered. "He took everything. They helped me sit down. They asked questions. I answered slowly, carefully, afraid my words might disappear. They took pictures of the empty fridge, the locked doors, the messages on my phone. As they left, one of them said, "We'll follow up." Follow up. Another promise that might fade into nothing. When the door closed again, I was alone, but something had changed. The silence no longer felt like surrender. It felt like the calm before a storm. My phone buzzed once more. This time it was Arif. "Why did you call the police?" I stared at the screen, my heart steady for the first time in days. Maybe I should have spoken sooner. Maybe I was wrong to stay silent. But I was done disappearing. I typed back, "Because I'm not going to rot here anymore." And as I sent the message, I knew whatever happened next would change everything. I stared at the sent message until the screen dimmed. For a moment, I expected fear to return, that familiar tightening in my chest. But instead I felt something new, steadier, heavier, like a door finally closing behind me. I had crossed the line. There was no going back to silence now. Whatever Arif and Sanaa had planned, I was no longer going to pretend it was for my own good. The house felt different after the police left. Not safer, not freer, but louder, as if the walls had started whispering secrets. Every corner reminded me of what I had lost and what I might still lose. I walked slowly through each room, touching the furniture, the photo frames, the curtains I had sewn myself years ago. I kept thinking, these might not be mine tomorrow. My phone vibrated again. Another message from Arif. "You embarrassed us. Everyone is talking." I closed my eyes. The word embarrassed echoed in my head. Not worried, not ashamed, embarrassed, as if my fear was an inconvenience, as if my pain had ruined his vacation photos. I typed erased, typed again. Finally, I sent, "I was hungry. I was locked in. I was scared." 3 sentences. The truth. He didn't reply. That night, I slept on the couch with the light on. Every small sound made me flinch. I dreamed of doors closing, of keys dropping into dark water, of Arif standing on the other side, his face unreadable. When I woke, my eyes were wet and my heart was racing. I whispered, I didn't raise him like this, like a prayer that might still save something. In the morning, the lawyer called. His voice was careful, measured. He said the emergency report had forced a temporary pause on the trust transfer. Temporary, a fragile word. He needed more proof, statements, witnesses, anything that showed coercion or digital impersonation. I told him everything again, slowly, as if repeating it might make it stronger. He listened, then said, we may need to involve the court. The word court made my stomach twist. I had spent my life avoiding conflict, choosing peace even when it hurt. Now peace had abandoned me, and conflict was the only door left open. Later that day, Mrs. Khan knocked again. This time, I could open the door. She stood there awkwardly, holding the same bag of fruit. Her eyes were full of apology. She said someone had called her before and told her not to interfere, that I was unstable. The word stung. I told her the truth. She listened in silence, then reached out and squeezed my hand. It was the first kindness I had felt in days. I almost cried again. That evening, Sanaa finally messaged me directly. Mom, please stop creating drama. Arif is under a lot of stress. I stared at the words. Drama. Stress. As if my life being taken apart was a performance. I replied, I am not angry. I am just hurt you didn't think of me. She didn't answer. Hours later, Arif called. His voice was cold. He said the lawyer had contacted him. He said I was ruining everything. He said I was ungrateful. I listened without interrupting, my heart heavy. When he finally stopped, I said softly, when did I stop mattering to you? There was a long silence. Then he said, you don't understand, and hung up. I sat there, phone in my hand, feeling the quiet sadness settle over me. Not sharp, not loud, just deep and endless. That night, another message arrived from the lawyer. We found irregularities in the verification timestamps. This may support your claim. Hope flickered inside me, small but bright. For the first time, I felt like the truth might stand beside me instead of against me. But hope didn't last long. The next morning, I received a notification from the bank. Account fully transferred. Access permanently removed. My breath caught. I called immediately, my hands shaking. The representative said the process had been finalized before the hold took effect. A technicality. One word and everything was gone. I felt something inside me collapse. The anger surged, hot and sudden. They had rushed it. They had planned this. I sent the message to the lawyer. He said he would challenge it, but it would take time. Time felt like another enemy. That afternoon, the family group chat came alive. Messages from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Some asked if I was okay. Others hinted that I should stop causing trouble. I realized Sanaa had already told her version. I was losing the story of my own life. I typed one sentence and sent it to the group. I am locked in my house, and my accounts were taken without my consent. Silence followed. Then one cousin replied, this is serious. We should talk. For the first time, I wasn't completely alone. As the sun set, I stood by the window watching the sky turn orange. My heart ached with anger, humiliation, sadness, and something else, determination. I had been quiet for too long. Now they would have to hear me. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from an unknown contact. Stop before it gets worse. I stared at the words, my pulse racing. Who sent it? And how much worse could this become? I knew then, this fight was only beginning. I read the message again and again. Stop before it gets worse. My fingers went cold. It wasn't signed. No name. No number I recognized. Just a threat, floating in the dark like a shadow with no face. For a moment I wondered if I was imagining danger, if fear had finally started to invent voices. But deep inside, I knew this wasn't empty. Someone was watching. Someone felt nervous now. I locked my phone and pressed it to my chest, trying to slow my breathing. The house felt different again. Heavier, darker, as if secrets were seeping from the walls. I walked through each room, checking the windows, the doors, even though I knew they were still controlled by someone else. The smart lock blinked softly, reminding me I was never really alone. That night, sleep wouldn't come. Every small sound made my heart jump. I replayed every memory with Arif, searching for the moment he changed. Or maybe he hadn't changed at all. Maybe I had simply refused to see what was always there. I whispered into the darkness. After everything I sacrificed, how did this become my life? In the morning, I received another message from the lawyer. He said he had filed an emergency petition with the court and requested a digital forensics review of the verification records. He warned me it could anger whoever was behind the transfers. The word anger felt small compared to what I had already survived. Still, fear crawled up my spine. I told him about the threat. He replied with one line, document everything. Do not engage. But how do you not engage when your life is being erased? I tried calling Arif again. No answer. I left a voice note, calm but firm, telling him I only wanted the truth. Minutes later, Sana replied instead. You are scaring him. Please stop scaring him. As if he wasn't the one who had locked me away. I stared at her message, my chest tight with a mix of anger and disbelief. I typed I was scared first. She never responded. Later that afternoon, I heard a car stop outside. My heart raced. I peeked through the curtain. It was a man in a dark jacket, standing near the gate, talking on his phone. He looked at the house, then at the camera. When our eyes met through the glass, he smiled slightly and drove away. I felt sick. Who was he? A lawyer? A friend? Someone Arif had sent to make sure I stayed quiet? I sat down, my legs trembling, and held my head in my hands. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. That evening, the cousin who had replied in the group chat called me. She said the family was confused, that Sana had told them I was refusing help and causing drama. I told her everything, slowly, my voice shaking. When I finished, there was a long pause. Then she whispered, "This is wrong." Those 3 words felt like someone finally standing beside me. She said she would speak to others. I didn't know if it would help, but the thought that someone believed me made my heart feel a little lighter. The next day, the court sent a notification. A preliminary hearing had been scheduled. My name was officially part of a case now. I read it 3 times, barely understanding the legal words, but I knew what it meant. They would have to face what they had done. That night, Arif finally called. His voice was tired, strained. He said he was trying to protect me, that I couldn't handle the stress of managing things anymore. I listened quietly, then said, "You decided that without me." He didn't answer. I stayed quiet to keep the peace, I continued softly. But silence doesn't mean consent. He hung up. I cried then, not loudly, just slow tears sliding down my face. It wasn't only anger anymore. It was grief for the son I thought I had, for the family I believed in, for the life that was slipping away. Days passed in a blur of messages, calls, and waiting. The lawyer updated me about the investigation. The police followed up with more questions. Each step forward felt heavy, but it also felt like reclaiming a small piece of myself. One evening, another unknown message arrived. "You should have listened." My hand shook. I showed it to the lawyer. He said this could support a claim of intimidation. Someone was trying to silence me. That knowledge, strange as it sounded, made me feel less alone. My fear had a shape now, and shapes can be faced. As I lay in bed that night, I thought about all the women like me, quiet, patient, afraid of being replaced. I wondered how many were suffering in silence, believing they had no right to speak. I whispered into the dark. Maybe I should have spoken sooner. But now I was speaking, and I wasn't going to stop. My phone buzzed once more. This time, it was a notification from the court system. New evidence uploaded. My heart pounded. What had they found? I opened the court notification with shaking hands. The screen loaded slowly, each second stretching like a lifetime. When the document finally appeared, I saw my name written in bold at the top, followed by lines of legal language I barely understood. But one phrase stood out, burning into my eyes: suspected digital identity misuse. For the first time, the the words matched my reality. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't confused. I had been violated. I scrolled down and saw a list of timestamps, locations, and device IDs. None of them were mine. They came from another city, another network, another life. My heart raced. Someone else had pretended to be me, and the system had believed them. I took screenshots and sent them to the lawyer. His reply came quickly. This changes everything. I leaned back against the couch, tears running freely now, not from fear, but from relief. After days of being dismissed, doubted, and erased, proof had finally spoken for me. But relief didn't last long. That afternoon, my phone rang. It was Arif's number. I hesitated before answering. His voice sounded different, sharp, defensive. He said the lawyer had accused him of fraud. He said Sanaa was crying. He said I was tearing the family apart. I listened, my heart aching. Then I said softly, the truth is tearing it apart, not me. There was silence. Then he said, you always think you're right, and hung up. The sadness that followed was quiet, like a slow rain. I sat alone, holding my phone, wondering when my son had stopped seeing me as his mother and started seeing me as a problem. That evening, another message arrived from Sanaa this time. If you go to court, we will cut you off completely. I read it twice. Cut me off, as if they hadn't already. My hands trembled as I typed back. You already did. She blocked me. I stared at the empty chat screen. The finality of it settled deep in my chest. They had chosen their side, and I was no longer on it. Days passed. The court date approached. Each morning I woke up with a knot in my stomach, unsure what the day would bring. The lawyer prepared me as best he could, explaining the process, the questions, the risks. He warned me that families often turned against the one who spoke up. I told him I already knew. One night, I found an old photo album in the cupboard. Arif as a child, smiling with missing teeth. My husband standing behind him, his hand on my shoulder. We looked like a family that belonged together. I pressed my fingers against the picture and whispered, when did I stop matching? The question echoed in the silent room. The night before the hearing, I barely slept. My mind raced with fear and hope, anger and grief. I prayed for strength, not to win, but to survive whatever came next. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a new message. It was from the unknown number again. This is your last warning. My heart pounded. I forwarded it to the lawyer. He told me to keep it as evidence. The threat only made me more determined. I had come too far to turn back now. When the day of the hearing arrived, I sat in my living room, dressed neatly, waiting for the video call to begin. My hands shook, but my voice stayed steady as I told my story. I spoke about the bank alerts, the locked doors, the fake signatures. I spoke about the hunger, the silence, the humiliation. I saw Arif and Sanaa on the screen. They wouldn't look at me. When it was over, I felt drained, like all the strength had left my body. But there was also a strange calm. I had finally said everything I had been holding inside. Hours later, the lawyer called. His voice carried a note of excitement. The judge had ordered a temporary restoration of my accounts and an investigation into the trust. It wasn't the end, but it was a beginning. I hung up and sat quietly, letting the news sink in. My dignity, so long buried under silence, felt a little lighter. But as night fell, my phone buzzed again. Another unknown message. You have no idea what you just started. I stared at the words, my heart pounding. What had I started? And who was truly behind all of this? I held the phone in both hands, staring at that last message until the words blurred. You have no idea what you just started. It felt less like a threat and more like a promise. My heart beat slow and heavy now, not wild like before. Fear had changed into something else. Awareness. Someone had gone too far to stay invisible. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Arif's face on the video call, the way he avoided my eyes. I wondered if he knew who was really pulling the strings, or if he had simply become a tool. I whispered into the dark, was I wrong to stay silent? The question felt heavier than the walls around me. In the morning, the lawyer called again. The court order had forced the bank to restore partial access to my account while the investigation continued. When I checked, A small portion of my money was there again. Not everything, but enough to breathe. Enough to remind me that I still existed in the world beyond these walls. I went to the kitchen and made tea. The steam rose like a quiet celebration. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to relief. But deep inside, I knew this calm would not last. People who steal your life do not let go easily. That afternoon, my cousin called. She said Sanaa had been calling relatives, telling them I was unstable and trying to destroy the family. Some believed her. Some didn't. The family was splitting in two, and my name sat in the center like a fault line. I closed my eyes and said softly, "After everything I sacrificed," my cousin sighed. "You don't deserve this," she said. Hearing that from someone else felt like oxygen. Later, I heard footsteps outside. I looked through the window and saw the same dark car from before. It slowed near my gate, then stopped. The man stepped out, glancing at the camera, then at my house. He raised his phone and took a picture. I felt my stomach drop. Before I could react, he drove away again. I sent the lawyer a message immediately. He replied, "We may need to request police protection if this continues." The idea of needing protection in my own home made me feel both small and furious. This was my life, my space, and someone was trying to scare me into giving it up. That night, Arif called again. His voice sounded tired, almost broken. He said Sanaa was angry, that the legal trouble was hurting their business, that people were talking. I listened quietly. Then I said, "I was only welcome when you needed something." There was a long pause. He whispered, "That's not true." But his voice lacked conviction. I wanted to reach through the phone and touch his face to remind him of who he used to be. Instead, I said, "I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm trying to survive." He didn't reply. When the call ended, I felt a strange mix of sadness and clarity. He was no longer the boy I raised, and I could no longer protect him from the consequences of his choices. Days passed. The investigation moved slowly. Each update from the lawyer felt like a small step forward. But the threats continued. Messages from unknown numbers. Missed calls that left no voice. The sense of being watched never left. One evening, as I was sitting alone, the doorbell app sent a notification. I opened it and froze. The man from the dark car stood at my gate again. This time, he spoke directly to the camera. "You should stop," he said calmly. "It's not safe." My heart pounded. I recorded the clip and sent it to the lawyer and the police. My hands shook, but my voice stayed steady as I whispered, "You will not scare me anymore." That night, I realized something had shifted. They were no longer confident. They were reacting. And people only react when they feel threatened. As I lay in bed, I felt the weight of everything I had lost, and the fragile hope of what I might still reclaim. I thought about all the women who stayed quiet to keep the peace. I had been one of them. Not anymore. My phone buzzed once more. A new message from the lawyer. "We traced the device used for the fake verifications. It belongs to someone close to your family." My breath caught. Who? And how much deeper did this betrayal go? I read the lawyer's message again, slowly, as if the words might change if I stared long enough. Someone close to your family. My heart thudded painfully in my chest. Close could mean many things. A cousin, a friend, a business partner, or someone who had been standing in my kitchen, drinking my tea, smiling at me while quietly planning my erasure. I sat very still, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator, trying to steady my breathing. The thought that this betrayal might not have come from my own son alone made my stomach twist. I had believed he was the center of this storm, but now it felt like he was only one piece of something much larger. I replied to the lawyer, asking who the device was registered to. His answer came hours later, long enough for my imagination to torture me with every possible name. When the notification finally appeared, I hesitated before opening it. Some part of me already knew the truth would hurt. The name on the screen was Sanaa's brother. I felt like the air had been punched out of my lungs. Sanaa's brother, the one who had helped Arif set up their family finances, the one who always spoke confidently about technology and security, the one who had offered to simplify everything for me months ago. I remembered how he had insisted on helping me update my phone, how he had guided me through face verification apps, telling me it was for my protection. I had trusted him. A quiet sob escaped my throat. It wasn't loud. It was the sound of a heart breaking slowly. So this was never just about Arif or Sanaa. It was about control. Money. Property. Power. They had built a web around me, and I had walked into it willingly, believing I was safe. I called the lawyer. My voice shook as I asked what this meant. He said the evidence was strong enough to pursue criminal charges for identity fraud and coercion. The words felt heavy, unreal. Criminal. Charges. Against family. When I hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. I thought about every holiday, every family gathering, every moment I had smiled at Sanaa's brother across the dinner table. I had never imagined he could be capable of this. That evening, Sanaa called. Her voice was sharp, defensive. She said I was destroying her family, that her brother was innocent, that I was being manipulated by outsiders. I listened quietly, then said he used my face. He used my name. She went silent. Then she whispered, "You don't understand what you're doing." The call ended. For the first time, I felt something close to power. Not because I wanted to hurt them, but because the truth had finally stepped into the light. The next day, the police contacted me for a formal statement. They asked about the night Sanaa's brother had helped me with my phone, about the bank alerts, about the locked doors. I answered everything, slowly and carefully. When it was over, I felt exhausted, but lighter, like I had finally set something down. Arif didn't call. Not that day. Not the next. His silence hurt more than his anger ever had. I wondered if he was ashamed, or if he was simply choosing to disappear rather than face what he had done. One afternoon, my cousin visited me. She hugged me tightly, her arms warm and real. She said some relatives were beginning to see the truth. Not all, but some. I nodded, grateful. I didn't need everyone. I just needed to know I wasn't alone. That night, I stood by the window and watched the lights of passing cars. For weeks, fear had lived in my chest. Now, it shared space with something new, clarity. I knew who had hurt me. I knew why. And I knew I would not carry their shame for them. My phone buzzed again. A message from the lawyer. The warrant has been approved. They will question him tomorrow. I closed my eyes and whispered, that's when everything changed. But deep inside, I knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of the truth. I sat with that message glowing in my hand. They will question him tomorrow. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt the ground shift beneath everyone else instead of me. The house no longer felt like a cage. It felt like the quiet center of a storm that was finally turning outward. I whispered, that's when everything changed, and meant it. Still, sleep wouldn't come. Every memory replayed itself in my mind. Sanaa's brother adjusting my phone, Arif standing behind him, nodding, telling me it was all for my safety. I had believed them. Trust, once broken, doesn't shatter all at once. It cracks slowly, painfully, until the smallest truth breaks it open. The next morning, I received a message from Sanaa. Not angry this time. Careful. Mom, please, let's talk before things go too far. I stared at the words, wondering when too far had started to mean too honest. I replied that I was willing to listen, but not to be lied to. She didn't answer. Hours later, my cousin called. She had heard from someone who worked near Sanaa's brother. He had been frantic, making calls, trying to fix something. The fear I had lived with for weeks now belonged to someone else. It was a strange feeling, almost unfairly satisfying. That afternoon, the lawyer updated me. The authorities had seized devices linked to the fraudulent verifications. They found deleted logs, hidden files, and records that showed my identity being used multiple times, not only for the trust, but for other transactions I had never seen. The web was larger than I imagined. My name had been used like a key to open doors I didn't know existed. I felt the quiet sadness settle in. Not for them, for myself. For the years I had spent believing my silence was strength. For every moment I doubted my own instincts. Then Arif called. His voice was low, unsteady. He said he had just learned the truth about his brother-in-law. He said he never meant for things to go this far. I listened without interrupting, my heart heavy. When he finished, I said softly, "You still locked me in." He whispered, I know. That was all. We said goodbye without saying it. That night, another message arrived from the unknown number that had threatened me before. It's too late now. I didn't feel afraid. I felt ready. The next morning, the lawyer called again. His voice carried urgency. There's something else, he said. Your husband's old property deed. It's not what you think. My breath caught. What did he mean? And what else had they hidden from me? When the lawyer said my husband's property deed was not what I thought, my first instinct was to laugh. A hollow, broken sound escaped my lips. That land had been my security, the last promise my husband left behind. I had held onto it like proof that my life still had a foundation. The idea that it could be another lie made my chest ache in a way I didn't know how to explain. I asked him what he meant. He hesitated, choosing his words carefully, the way people do when they know what they're about to say will hurt. He explained that the deed had been quietly amended 2 years ago, not fully transferred, but altered just enough to give temporary control to someone else if certain conditions were met. Those conditions, according to the document, had already been triggered. I felt dizzy. 2 years ago, I had been grieving, barely surviving the loss of my husband. I had trusted Arif and Sanaa to help me manage paperwork. I had believed they were protecting me. Now I realized they had been preparing for this long before I ever suspected. My voice shook as I asked who had made the changes. The lawyer said the amendment had been processed by the same digital ID used for the trust. The same device. Sanaa's brother. It felt like the walls were closing in again. But this time I stood straighter. They had planned this. They had waited. They had thought I would never fight back. I sat alone for a long time, staring at the floor, remembering my husband's voice, his laugh, the way he told me the house would always be mine. I whispered his name, apologizing for not protecting what he left. Tears fell, slow and heavy. Later that day, Arif came to the house. I froze when I heard his voice through the door. My heart pounded, fear and longing colliding inside me. I opened it slowly. He looked smaller somehow, like the weight of his choices had finally reached his shoulders. We stood there in silence until he said, I didn't know about the deed. I searched his face for the truth. He looked away. I should have, he added quietly. We sat in the living room, the air thick with everything we had never said. He told me Sanaa's brother had promised to protect the assets, to make sure everything stayed in the family. He said he trusted him. I closed my eyes. You trusted him more than me, I whispered. He had no answer. Before he left, he said, I never wanted to hurt you. I replied softly, intent doesn't erase pain. When he walked out, I felt a strange mix of grief and release. The son I raised was still there, somewhere beneath the damage, but I could no longer save him from himself. That evening, the lawyer called again. The authorities had formally charged Sanaa's brother. Fraud, identity theft, coercion. Hearing the words felt unreal. A chapter of my life was closing, but another was opening, one I had never imagined for myself. As night fell, I stood by the window, watching the lights of the city. For the first time, I felt something close to dignity return. I had been broken, but I was not gone. They had tried to erase me, and instead they had awakened me. My phone buzzed once more. A message from the court. Hearing scheduled. New evidence submitted. My heart beat faster. What new evidence? And how much more of my past had been rewritten without my knowing? The next morning I couldn't eat. I sat by the window, tea cooling in my hand, staring at the street as if it might reveal some hidden answer. My mind replayed the court hearing over and over. The way Sanaa's brother had sounded calm, almost smug, as if he owned the truth. The way the officials had nodded, taking notes. The new evidence had shaken me, but it had also opened something I hadn't expected. A trail, a clue, a chance to finally understand how deep the betrayal ran. My phone buzzed. Another message from the lawyer. He said they had found a hidden clause in the property papers, a clause my husband had secretly added himself years ago. It allowed him to regain control in case of fraud or coercion. My hand shook as I read. My husband had anticipated someone trying to take everything from me. He had trusted me to fight, to notice, to claim what was mine. and somehow I had not seen it until now. A surge of emotion hit me: grief, anger, pride, and a strange sense of connection to the man I had lost. I couldn't sit still. I paced the living room, remembering all the small moments, the subtle lessons he had tried to teach me. Trust, but verify, he had said once, handing me a folder with property documents. I had smiled, thinking he was cautious, but now I understood the depth of his foresight. The fight I had been thrown into was not entirely new. It had been planned, and he had left me the tools, even if I had not known they were there. The lawyer called again. His voice was tense. He said authorities had traced financial irregularities connected to multiple accounts linked to Sanaa's brother. There were transactions I had never heard of, assets being moved in ways I didn't understand, all pointing back to the same family network that had tried to erase me. He said, "They underestimated you, Nana May. They assumed silence would make you disappear." I swallowed hard. He was right. For too long, I had been quiet, polite, and compliant. But silence no longer had power over me. I thought about Arif, about how he had avoided confrontation, had trusted his brother-in-law over his own mother, and yet he had not fully betrayed me, at least not knowingly. I realized he was still caught in the web, trapped by loyalty, fear, and manipulation. My heart ached for him, but I also knew that mercy would not stop this fight. The family had learned too late that I could not be ignored, and I would not allow them to erase my life any longer. Later that afternoon, I received a call from an unknown number. My hands trembled as I answered. A deep voice spoke. "We know what you're trying to do," it said. "Step carefully, Nana May. Not everything is what it seems." My pulse quickened. I asked who it was, but the line went dead. I realized immediately that this was not just about Arif or Sanaa's brother. It was about a network, a chain of people who had been manipulating everything in my life for years. My fear rose, but beneath it a fire burned. I would not be intimidated. I had lost too much to back down now. That night I couldn't sleep. I thought about all the hidden transactions, the forged documents, the locked doors, the hunger, the isolation. I remembered every moment of humiliation, how it felt to see my family celebrating without me, to know that my voice was silenced, that my consent had been stolen. But I also remembered the court, the lawyer, and the digital trail that now worked in my favor. I whispered to the darkness. I stayed quiet to keep the peace. But silence does not protect me anymore. The next morning, my cousin arrived. She had information I hadn't expected. She told me that several relatives had started to question Sanaa and her brother, that whispers of manipulation and coercion were spreading, and that some family members had begun collecting evidence of their own. I felt a flicker of hope. For the first time, I sensed that I was not alone in this fight, that the truth was gathering momentum. The lawyer called again that afternoon. He said authorities were preparing to confront Sanaa's brother directly. They had gathered enough evidence to force a full confession or a prolonged investigation. I felt my heart pound. This was the moment I had waited for, the moment where the predators in my life would finally feel exposed. But I also felt fear. Exposure could provoke desperation, and desperation could be dangerous. That evening, I sat by the window, listening to the hum of the city, thinking about the woman I had become. I realized that for too long, I had measured my worth by their approval, their acceptance, their recognition. Now, I measured it by my ability to survive, to fight, to reclaim what was rightfully mine. The anger and grief were still there, but they were sharper, more focused, and strangely liberating. I whispered, "I didn't raise him like this," thinking of Arif, "but I can protect myself now." Late that night, a message arrived on my phone. Another unknown number. "You think you're winning, but the game has only begun." I stared at the words, feeling both fear and exhilaration. Whoever sent it knew about the court, knew about the evidence, and knew that I had taken control of my life. The realization was terrifying, but the fire inside me burned brighter. I typed a single sentence and sent it back. "I am not afraid anymore." I didn't know if they would reply. I didn't care. The power had shifted. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was standing in the center of my own life. not at the mercy of others. The next morning, the lawyer called. His voice was urgent. Authorities had obtained a preliminary confession from Sanaa's brother. He had admitted to the fraudulent use of my digital identity, the altered deed, and multiple financial manipulations. My stomach dropped. I had imagined this moment countless times, but reality was heavier than I expected. He had confessed, but the damage he had done, emotionally, financially, and relationally, could not be undone with words alone. I sat quietly, letting the news sink in. For weeks, I had lived in fear, starvation, and isolation. Now, the truth was finally out, but the consequences of that truth were just beginning. I realized that the family I had trusted, the son I had loved, and the network of manipulation surrounding them had underestimated the strength I carried within me. And that strength, I knew, would not allow me to remain silent any longer. Later that evening, Arif called. His voice was low, hesitant. He said he had just learned the full extent of his brother-in-law's crimes, that he had been deceived, and that he wanted to help make things right. I listened quietly, heart pounding. I knew this was a turning point, not just for him, but for all of us. You should have told me sooner, I said softly. He said nothing. You still have a chance to choose the right side, I added. There was silence, and then he whispered, I will try. That night, I stood by the window, looking out at the quiet city streets, reflecting on everything I had endured. Locking doors, stolen money, threats, isolation, all of it had been intended to break me. But I had survived. I had reclaimed my voice. And I had discovered that even in the darkest moments, there was a way to fight back, a way to take control, and a way to protect what mattered most. My phone buzzed again. Another unknown message. You've seen only the beginning. I stared at it, heart steady, breath slow. Whatever lay ahead, I knew one thing. I would not go silent again. I would face the shadows, uncover every secret, and reclaim my life. The morning of the official court hearing arrived, but I couldn't tell if my hands were shaking from fear or from anticipation. I dressed carefully, simple but sharp, the way my husband had always advised, present yourself with dignity, even when the world tries to strip it from you. The lawyer called while I was putting on my coat, reminding me to stay calm, to speak slowly, to remember the facts. But facts felt like fragile weapons against the storm of betrayal I had endured. What would words do to undo months of hunger, isolation, lies, and manipulation? The video call began, and immediately I saw their faces, the officials, the attorneys, and finally, Sanaa's brother. He looked calm, smug even, as if he had already won. But this time I did not feel small. I did not feel the fear that had consumed me for weeks. I drew in a deep breath and told myself, this is your moment. Speak, stand, reclaim. When it was my turn, I began. I spoke about the bank alerts, the locked doors, the hunger, the silence. I spoke about being erased from my own life, about how my identity had been used as a weapon. My voice shook, but I did not stop. I told them about Sanaa's brother, about the fake verifications, about the altered deed. Every word felt like a piece of armor, slowly building a shield that no one could pierce. Then came the new evidence. A video recording, retrieved from a hidden server, of a conversation between my husband and a business associate just weeks before he passed. The lawyer played it slowly. My husband's voice was firm, deliberate, but there was a weight in it I had never heard before. He spoke about protecting the family, about anticipating betrayal, and about leaving mechanisms in place to safeguard what was mine. He had known that someone close might try to take control, and he had trusted me to see it, to fight, to reclaim our life. I felt tears prick my eyes, but I refused to cry aloud. For so long, I had thought my husband had left me defenseless, that his death had made me vulnerable. But the recording proved the opposite. He had planned for my survival, for my strength. I whispered under my breath, I see you now. I see everything. The lawyer spoke next, explaining the financial irregularities, the hidden transactions, the coercion, and the identity fraud. The officials listened intently. I saw the first crack in the calm mask of Sanaa's brother. His eyes flickered, betraying a hint of panic. He was used to controlling everything, to bending everyone to his will. But now the walls were closing in. I felt a quiet satisfaction. Power was shifting. Arif appeared briefly in a window on the screen. He looked pale, unsure, almost afraid. I caught his eye and spoke softly. "This is what I have endured. This is what I have survived." He nodded slightly but said nothing. The silence between us carried more weight than any words could. I realized he was beginning to understand the scale of the betrayal, the consequences of trust misplaced, the depth of my pain. But more importantly, I realized he was also beginning to respect my strength. The hearing dragged on. Question after question, document after document, proof after proof. I answered each with calm precision, my voice steady even when my heart raced. I recalled the nights locked in my own home, the hunger, the messages, the threats, the isolation. I told him about the smart doorbell recordings, the bank alerts, the voice messages from unknown numbers warning me to stay silent. Every piece of evidence connected, forming a mosaic of betrayal, manipulation, and courage. And with every word, I felt my power growing, my dignity returning, my place in the world reclaiming itself. Then came the most shocking revelation. The lawyer presented documents showing that my husband had left a secondary clause in the corporate holdings, a clause that allowed me to regain control legally and irrevocably if coercion or fraud was detected. The officials leaned forward, and I realized what this meant. My husband had foreseen every possible attempt to erase me, and he had trusted me to recognize it. The flood of emotion hit me all at once: grief, relief, pride, and a righteous fury. I whispered, "You knew. You always knew." Sanaa's brother could no longer hide it. His calm demeanor cracked, his voice grew tense. He argued, stammered, and tried to shift blame. But the digital trail, the recordings, and the documents were too clear. I sat silently, watching him unravel, feeling the long months of fear and humiliation finally turning into vindication. I had survived their plotting, their lies, and their manipulation. Now they would face the consequences. Then came another twist, the final document. A will my husband's hand signed, hidden in a safe deposit box I had never known about. It explicitly named me as the sole guardian of the estate, with powers to override any fraudulent actions, any attempts to manipulate or coerce. My hands shook as I realized the depth of his foresight. He had not only protected me, but had trusted me to fight, to reclaim, to survive. I whispered into the room, almost aloud, "I am ready." Arif's face appeared again. His eyes were wide, understanding dawning. He spoke softly, I didn't know. I should have seen it. I nodded, letting him understand without needing to forgive immediately. Forgiveness was not mine to give yet. Recognition, understanding, acknowledgement, that was enough for now. The hearing ended with the officials promising swift action. Charges would be filed against Sanaa's brother. The fraudulent transactions would be reversed, and the property would be fully restored under my control. I felt a wave of relief, but also a strange emptiness. The fight was far from over. There were still family dynamics to navigate, still whispers, still scars. But for the first time in weeks, I felt like the storm had turned, and I was standing at its center, unbroken. That night, I sat alone by the window, looking out at the quiet streets. The messages had stopped, the threats had paused, and the house felt like it belonged to me again. I whispered into the darkness, "I am still here. I have survived, and I will not be silenced again." But even as I spoke those words, my phone buzzed. Another message from an unknown number. "You've uncovered the beginning. The rest is still hidden." I stared at it, my heart steady, my mind sharp. Whatever lay ahead, I knew this, I would face it. I would uncover every secret, confront every betrayal, and reclaim every piece of my life. The court had proven that truth could prevail. My husband's foresight had given me the tools. And now, finally, I had the courage. I whispered once more, softly, to myself, "I am ready for everything." The days after the court hearing were surreal. My house, once silent and suffocating, now felt alive, not with laughter, but with tension. Even the air seemed sharper, charged with the knowledge that the truth had begun to surface. Yet, I could sense the undercurrent. There was still more hidden, still more waiting to be revealed. My husband's foresight had been incredible, but nothing prepared me for what would come next. It started with the lawyer calling early in the morning. His voice was cautious, almost hesitant, which immediately made my pulse quicken. "Nana May," he said, "there's something else, something your husband left behind. It's not in the property documents or the will. It's something more personal, something that could change everything about the family and the inheritance." I froze. My hands gripped the edge of the table as he explained. A sealed envelope had been found, tucked inside a safety deposit box linked to a third-party trust. The box had never been mentioned in any previous documents I had handled. Its existence had been entirely unknown to everyone, my family, the lawyers, even Arif. Only my husband had known, and now it was time to reveal it. I asked the lawyer what was in the envelope. He said he hadn't opened it yet. Legally, it needed to be handled with care, and the court had insisted on his presence when the contents were revealed. He warned me, "Whatever is inside, it could shock you, possibly change your understanding of your family, your husband, and the past decades." Shock. My chest tightened. Change my understanding? After everything I had already endured, after being locked in, manipulated, and erased, how much more could there be? The lawyer drove to my house, envelope in hand. We sat at the kitchen table, the morning light falling across it, and he placed the envelope gently in front of me. The paper felt thick and heavy in my hands, as if the weight of decades of secrets had been pressed into it. I hesitated, staring at the seal. Then, slowly, I broke it open. Inside, there was a thick packet of handwritten letters, financial ledgers, and a single USB drive. My husband's handwriting sprawled across each page, careful yet precise, the way he always documented everything. I felt a shiver run through me. These were personal, detailed records, things no one had ever seen. I asked the lawyer if I should read them alone. He nodded. "Yes, but be prepared. Some of this will be difficult to accept." I started with the letters. The first one was addressed to me, written years before my husband's death. His words were calm, deliberate, but full of emotion. "Nana May, if you are reading this, it means I am gone. I have left protections in place for you. But there is more than just money or property at stake. There are people in the family who may try to take advantage of grief and loyalty. You must trust your instincts. I have hidden certain truths in the documents I leave behind. You will find the keys. Do not be afraid to use them. You are stronger than you know." I paused, a lump in my throat. His foresight, his trust, his love, it all hit me at once. Tears ran down my face. For so long, I had felt abandoned, erased, betrayed. And yet here he was, guiding me even from beyond the grave. I turned to the ledgers. They were detailed, showing financial distributions, hidden accounts, and coded notes about transactions that Sanaa's brother had been manipulating. But there was one entry that made my hands tremble. It referenced a transfer labeled Legacy, Hidden Guardian, an account that legally could not be touched by anyone but me, and only if certain fraudulent actions were detected. That included everything Sanaa and her brother had tried to steal. My chest tightened with a strange mixture of fear, rage, and vindication. And then I came to the USB drive. My husband had labeled it simply Truth Family Matters. I plugged it into my laptop, the lawyer hovering nearby. The screen flickered to life, revealing a video file. My hand shook as I clicked play. My husband appeared, older, wiser, his face calm but serious. His eyes locked with mine through the screen, and I felt as if he were speaking directly to my soul. "If you are seeing this, Nana May, it means the worst has happened, or is about to happen. I leave you with more than property or money. I leave you with the knowledge of truth. Truth about our family, about loyalty, and about choices. There are secrets hidden, things you have never been told, even by those you trust. This video will guide you. Watch carefully, and trust no one who seeks to manipulate love or fear." My breath caught. My husband had anticipated manipulation not just from outside sources, but from within our family. He had known there were people who would try to erase me, even under the guise of care. The video continued. He revealed financial records, emails, and screenshots, all proving that Sanaa's brother had been plotting for years, not only to control the family estate, but to manipulate Arif into complicity. But the true shock came at the end, a confession recorded by my husband himself. He admitted that he had suspected someone close, someone I had trusted implicitly, might betray us after his passing. He had hidden documents, coded messages, and even financial fail-safes, ensuring that I would uncover the truth and reclaim control. I felt the weight of decades of deception lift from me, replaced by an overwhelming sense of power and clarity. The man I had loved had not left me defenseless. He had armed me with knowledge, trust, and the tools to reclaim my life. The lawyer looked at me, his expression a mixture of awe and caution. "This changes everything," he said. I nodded, my mind racing. I realized that the next step was not only legal, but deeply personal. I had to confront the family, the betrayals, and the manipulation head-on. And I would do it with the proof my husband had left me, the foresight he had trusted me to see, and the power I had finally reclaimed. That night, I sat alone, reading the letters again, watching the video over and over. Each revelation cut deeper than the last, but each also strengthened me. I whispered into the darkness, "I am ready. I see the truth, and no one can take it from me." But as I looked at my phone, a new message appeared. Unknown number, familiar tone. "You think you know it all, Nana May, but some truths are too dangerous to reveal." I stared at it, my heart steady, my mind sharp. My husband had left me the tools, the knowledge, and the authority. But even with all this, I realized one truth. The family network of lies, manipulation, and betrayal had only begun to unravel. And the real battle for dignity, control, and the hidden secrets of my husband's past was just beginning. I whispered one last time before standing, "I will uncover everything, every hidden truth, every betrayal, and I will reclaim what is mine." The envelope, the letters, the video, they were no longer just documents. They were weapons, shields, and keys. And I, Nana May, was ready to wield them. Outside, the night was quiet. Inside, I felt a storm building. And I knew, deep in my bones, that when the next confrontation came, nothing would ever be the same again.